No one could calm the Arab millionaire who was overcome by uncontrollable rage. It was only when the cleaning lady addressed him in his native language, Arabic, that the situation was reversed. Leave your like and comment to support the channel and follow our story. The sound of breaking glass reverberated through the luxurious lobby of the Copacabana Palace Hotel. Employees exchanged worried glances as guests cautiously moved away. At the epicenter of the chaos, a tall, elegant man in an impeccable suit gestured with frustration on his face as he spoke in English with a marked accent. "This is inappropriate. 3 days, and you still haven't solved such a simple problem." Lila Mendez watched the situation unfold as she guided her cleaning cart away from the commotion. She kept her head down, as she had learned during her 6 months working at this luxury hotel. Invisibility was a skill that cleaning staff mastered. The manager's tone was tense as he struggled to calm the angry guest. "Sir, Al-Fahad, I assure you we are doing everything humanly possible." The Arab man interrupted with a laugh. "I am paying for the best suite in this hotel. My team arrives tomorrow for negotiations that could redefine investments in your country, and you can't even guarantee the basic comfort of my room." Layla, with her navy blue badge adjusted, continued down the side corridor. She had encountered this type of complaint several times before. Since his arrival 3 days ago, Karim Al-Fahad, CEO of Al-Fahad Holdings, had been the center of attention among the staff. Known for his millionaire status, the United Arab Emirates, with an estimated fortune of billions, famous for his business acumen and explosive personality. The broken glass, a simple glass of water that had slipped from the tray of a distressed waiter, was no one's fault. But for someone like Al-Had Layla, any small mistake became a problem when things were already not going his way. "Sir, our technical team is already on its way." "Your technical team is incompetent," Al-Fahad muttered, running his hand through his dark hair. "I'm tired of empty promises. I want to talk to The owner of the establishment was away on business. Marcos Vasconcelos, the hotel owner, was not present. Layla watched the manager turn pale as he struggled to find words that would not further aggravate the problem. Something inside her stirred, as if a memory had surfaced. The aroma of cardamom and coffee in the morning air, the sound of her father's voice speaking fluent Arabic with diplomats visiting his residence in Muscat, the capital of Oman, where he lived from ages 8 to 16. Her father, he used to say, "To know someone's language is to know their essence." For this reason, as a Brazilian diplomat, he made it a priority for Layla and her sister to learn the local language wherever they were sent. "Cancel my reservation," Al-Fahad announced, causing a new wave of apprehension among the staff. "My assistant will arrange accommodations at another hotel, and you will inform the press why the largest Arab investor of the moment has decided to leave the establishment." It was at that moment that Layla acted in a way she had never done before. She considered doing something that defied all the unspoken rules of her position. She took a step back, took a deep breath, and turned around. "La Tarzan Almu Shakat Basita." The words flowed effortlessly from her lips. "Don't worry. The solution is simple." A deathly silence fell. All eyes were fixed on the maid in her blue uniform, who had dared to speak up. Alpha's expression changed from fury to complete astonishment. "Tata kalam alaria?" he asked incredulously. "You speak Arabic?" Layla's face flushed, but she stood her ground. Years in the Middle East had taught her the importance of calm. "Yes," Namam replied concisely. The manager seemed on the verge of fainting, torn between gratitude for her sudden action and fear of seeing a maid approach the VIP guest directly. Al-Fahad took 2 steps toward Layla, his posture becoming slightly more relaxed. He watched her curiously as the attention on her shoulders diminished. "How did you learn my language?" he asked in impeccable Portuguese. To Layla's surprise, "I lived in Oman for 8 years. My father was a diplomat." A subtle smile appeared on his lips. "And now you clean rooms?" It wasn't a question. His voice carried no contempt, just an observation. Layla, however, felt a knot of pride tighten in her chest. I'm currently finishing my master's degree in international relations and working to pay my expenses, she replied with a firm posture. You're having problems with the air conditioning system, correct? It's a problem with the building's central system, not just in your suite. We are experiencing an exceptionally intense heat wave. Intense heat is common in August in Rio. Alfad raised an eyebrow, visibly surprised by the frankness of the answer. But the maintenance team is working to resolve the problem, Layla added. In the meantime, perhaps I can suggest something I learned in Muscat to alleviate the heat, she said. A deathly silence fell, everyone waiting for the manager's reaction, when Alfad, with a gesture, asked for silence. Continue, he ordered. His eyes were fixed on Layla, a cloth dampened with cold water and sprinkled with oil. The cool breeze of the afternoons and pulses. My mother used to do this to cool us down in the summers in Muscat when the air conditioning wasn't working. It was a surprisingly effective technique. A heavy silence fell after her words. The manager seemed to be in a state of panic, probably imagining losing his job that very day. But suddenly something unexpected happened. Karim Al-Fahad smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face completely. Thank you, he said. Thank you, Muscat, wonderful city. In which neighborhood do you live? Al-Uair, located near the embassy. The hotel manager, taking advantage of the situation, approached, gesturing frantically to an employee to clean up the broken glass. Mr. Alfad, would you like to have a drink at the bar while our staff finishes the repairs? On the house, of course. The Arab businessman, however, completely ignored the manager. His eyes remained fixed on Layla. What is your name? He asked. Layla Mendes. Layla, he repeated, and something in the intonation with which he pronounced her name sent a shiver down her spine. An Arabic nickname for a Brazilian daughter. My mother. He longed for the meaning. An Arab night, and she had chosen wisely. Alfad clenched his fists and then did something completely unexpected. Miss Mendez, would you accept dinner with me tonight? We would like to talk more about your experiences in Oman. The manager let out a gasp of surprise. Layla felt the blush rise to her cheeks. It was completely inappropriate, violated all hotel rules, and could cause problems in many ways. My lord, I fear this may not be possible. My shift ends at 10 p.m. So, at 10, he replied without hesitation, at the hotel restaurant. Mr. Alfahad, interrupted the manager, trying to regain his composure. Perhaps we could hire a professional tour guide to accompany you and show you the city. We have partnerships with excellent agencies. I don't need a tour guide, said Al-Fahad without taking his eyes off Layla. I need someone who knows as much about my culture as they do about the culture of this country. It is an invitation of a professional nature, Miss Mendes. I am looking to expand. My investments in Brazil depend on your unique expertise. Layla hesitated, aware that refusing could jeopardize the hotel and therefore her own job. But accepting would mean crossing a line that clearly distinguished employees from guests. As her mind weighed the consequences, the manager anticipated her thoughts. Ms. Mendez will be excused from her duties after 10 a.m. if that is your wish, sir. The manager's gaze toward Layla made it clear that he was not being sincere. The choice was hers. If the important guest wanted her company, the hotel would do its utmost to satisfy his requests. Layla hesitated, but then straightened her shoulders and replied, I'll be in the restaurant at 7 in the evening. The businessman seemed pleased. Excellent. He then said goodbye, adding, Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make. As he turned to leave, however, he stopped and looked over his shoulder. And about the air conditioning, I'll wait until tomorrow. I'll try your suggestion of using mint. With that, he headed for the elevators, leaving behind. A deathly silence hung in the lobby. The moment the elevator doors closed, the silence was broken by a flurry of conversation. The manager approached Layla with an expression that mixed relief and apprehension. Layla, what happened? You never mentioned you spoke Arabic. No one ever asked me, she replied, still absorbed in what had just happened. Regardless of what you said, you saved our hotel from a crisis. Alfad represents one of the largest investment groups in the Middle East. He is here to finalize the acquisition of a hotel chain. In Brazil, Layla felt the weight of the situation distracting her, her mind already preoccupied with what to wear, what to say, how to act. A dinner with one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the Arab world. It was not the evening she had imagined after a 12-hour day cleaning rooms. "Did he ask you what exactly he said to you in Arabic?" insisted the curious manager. "Only if he asked if I spoke Arabic," she replied, pushing the cleaning cart again. "I have to finish my shift. I still have 6 rooms to clean by 10 o'clock. The manager nodded, still looking puzzled. Of course, of course. "But, Layla," he whispered, "be careful tonight. Men like Alpha don't usually invite female employees to dinner without a purpose." Layla shot the manager a determined look. "I am perfectly capable of protecting myself, Mr. Garcia. I've lived in the Middle East long enough to understand its cultural nuances." With that, she continued down the hallway, her heart racing. What had she just done? Why intervene? Years spent preserving her past He had spent years building a simple, quiet life, devoting himself to his studies, and in one impulsive act, he had revealed everything. As she pushed her cart toward the service elevator, Layla couldn't get Karim Al-Fahad's gaze out of her mind. Deep, penetrating, and, for a moment, truly surprised. It was the first time in a long time that Layla had felt a twinge of something she had almost forgotten. The excitement, the adrenaline, the challenge of the unexpected. "It's just a business dinner," she said. She knew that her life had taken an irreversible turn. Upon entering her small apartment in Botafogo, Layla left her bag on the sofa and rushed to the shower. With only 45 minutes to spare, she needed to transform herself from the tired maid she was into someone worthy of dinner with a billionaire. The modest and functional space of the apartment mirrored her current reality, a temporary life, far from the years she had spent in luxury homes. 5 years after the premature loss of her father, and with her mother having moved to. With her new husband, Layla had decided to seek independence, even if it required intense effort. Under the hot shower, she sought clarity in her thoughts. But what motivated Karim Alpha to hire a maid when he could hire a professional translator or an expert in Arab culture? Why her, a simple maid who just happened to speak his language? Wrapped in a towel, Layla looked at her modest wardrobe. The last time she had enjoyed a fancy restaurant was at her college graduation party 3 years ago. In the end, she opted for a simple navy blue dress, her favorite color, and the only pair of heels she owned. As she tied her hair into a low bun, her phone vibrated. It was a message from her coworker, Patricia. "Is it true what they're saying? Are you having dinner with Sheikh?" Layla rolled her eyes. The news had already spread throughout the dorm. In a quick reply, she typed, "It's not a she, it's a businessman. And yes, it's just a business dinner." 3 dots lit up the screen while Patricia typed her reply, "Professionally." She knew that. She was a professional. Layla was attentive. Rich is rich in any language. Putting her phone away, Layla took a deep breath as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She wasn't stupid. She understood that men in positions of influence often blurred boundaries, but she also had the ability to assert herself, a lesson learned as the daughter of a diplomat, in places where women weren't always heard. Upon arrival, she crossed the hotel lobby through the main entrance. It was a peculiar experience after months of exclusive access through the service entrance. The security guard, he recognized her, and his eyes widened, but he remained silent. The hotel restaurant, one of the most sophisticated in Rio, boasted crystal chandeliers, live piano music, and waiters in impeccable uniforms. Karim Alpha was already at his table, talking on the phone. When he saw her, he immediately ended the call. As he stood up, Layla noticed how the dark suit fit him perfectly over his broad shoulders, revealing a magnetic aura that transcended his obvious wealth. Senrita Mendez pointed to the chair in front of him, demonstrating his punctuality. "I appreciate that." "Yes, thank you for seeing me, Mr. Karim," Layla replied formally, taking a seat. Her accent made the pronunciation of Portuguese words a true melody. "This isn't a formal setting," he added with a smile. A waiter approached with a bottle of red wine. "Would you like me to pour now?" Karim looked at Layla, seeking an answer in her eyes. "I don't drink alcohol," she said, thanking him. A slight smile appeared on his lips. "Sparkling water for both of us, then." He then ordered the waiter, who looked surprised, but he agreed and left. "You don't have to avoid anything on my account," said Layla. "I know that not all Muslims follow dietary rules." "You're right." Karim sat down, watching her. "But today I'd rather keep my head clear for our conversation, which I have a feeling will be significant." The waiter returned with the water and menus. Karim waved his away. He had already asked the chef to prepare Brazilian dishes. "I hope that's not a problem. I want to try the local cuisine with someone who can explain its subtleties." Layla felt a little uncomfortable with the way he took the initiative, but she was intrigued by his sincere curiosity. Layla Mendes, as he called her, was being watched closely by him. Born to a diplomat, she spoke Arabic fluently, was pursuing a master's degree, and worked as a chambermaid. Her story was already captivating in the first few sentences. She took a sip of water. "My father worked in several embassies. Oman was where we lived the longest. After his death, I was forced to support myself." "My condolences." The authenticity in his voice touched her deeply. She was studying international relations, focusing on trade between Brazil and the Gulf countries, and her eyes sparkled with sincere interest, something that seemed unusual for a Brazilian. But not too much. Layla felt more secure in an academic environment. After all, Brazil has strong trade ties with the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Her research analyzes how these ties can be strengthened with smaller Gulf countries, such as Oman. Karim seemed genuinely interested. Leaning slightly over the table, Layla momentarily forgot that she was dining with a billionaire in a high-end restaurant. The UAE holds a strategic position and has historically pursued a neutral foreign policy. Layla wondered how Brazil could strengthen itself through more solid partnerships with the country, particularly in areas such as food and agricultural technology. Karim watched her with a look that Layla couldn't quite interpret. "What happened?" she said, suddenly realizing she had said too much. "It's refreshing," he replied with a smile. "Most of the time when I have dinner with someone, the conversation focuses on my money, my business, or my plans." Layla felt her face flush. "But you asked about my studies and responded knowledgeably, not like someone trying to please a wealthy client." He took a sip of water. "That's why you fascinate me. Layla Mendes. There's a discrepancy between your current situation and the person you really are." The first course was served, a shrimp appetizer, subtly prepared with a passion fruit sauce. Karim waited for Layla to encourage him to try it, before tasting it himself. "Delicious," he exclaimed, surprised. The sweetness of the passion fruit harmonizes perfectly with the saltiness of the shrimp, a traditional combination in northeastern cuisine, reinterpreted for a global audience, said Layla. "In Brazil, we often combine sweet and salty in ways that surprise foreigners." The conversation flowed naturally throughout the meal, as Layla detailed each dish, its origin, and cultural significance. Karim asked intelligent questions, revealing a sincere interest in. He surprised her. After the milk pudding, which Karim praised enthusiastically, he finally got to the subject that Layla believed was the real reason for the dinner. "I'm in Brazil to finalize the acquisition of a hotel chain," he revealed. "But I'm also looking at other sectors for potential investment," he added. Layla cautiously commented, "The manager mentioned something about that." "My main area of interest is agribusiness and sustainable tourism," he said. Karim signaled to the waiter, who then handed him a leather briefcase. However, he encountered some obstacles. In cultural negotiations, obstacles can arise that can be challenging. Brazilians are known for their friendliness, but there are subtleties in their communication that can lead to confusion. He opened a folder, revealing documents with notes in the margins. Layla, for example, found it difficult to interpret expressions such as, "Let's study this possibility," which can mean either genuine interest or a diplomatic refusal. Layla smiled, understanding the problem perfectly, as this phrase is often a polite way of buying time. Brazilians tend to avoid direct confrontation, particularly in professional contexts. Indeed. Karim tapped the table lightly. "Although we Arabs may seem too direct, even rude, we are actually just seeking efficiency." For almost an hour, they discussed the cultural nuances in negotiation methods, Layla detailed Brazilian social codes, implicit subtleties, and topics to avoid. Karim listened attentively and jotted down a few points. You have a natural gift for explaining cultural complexities in a clear and concise manner, he said finally. It's a unique and valuable skill. Thank you. Layla glanced at her watch and saw that it was already past midnight. She realized it was getting late, as her shift started at 7 a.m. It was obvious. Karim closed the folder, but before they said goodbye, he made a proposal. Layla felt a twinge of anxiety. Was this where the expectations mentioned by the manager would materialize? I need someone to act as a cultural consultant and translator in my meetings for the next 2 weeks, he said, maintaining a professional tone. Someone who is well-versed in Brazilian culture. As for Arabic, he offered to help her navigate the complexities of the negotiations. He would be willing to pay her 5 times her monthly salary for 2 weeks of work. Layla was surprised by the offer, but she mentioned her job at the hotel and her classes, having already spoken to the manager. Karim, however, seemed to have anticipated this argument and agreed to release her temporarily, guaranteeing her position. He was understanding about her classes, saying he could adjust his schedule to accommodate them. The offer was tempting, almost unimaginable. The amount mentioned would be enough to cover her rent for almost a year. Why me? Layla asked. She had already found professional translators and experienced cultural consultants, but none of them had convinced her like you did today. The honesty in his words was evident. More than that, there was something unique about someone who understands both worlds, not just theoretically, but in a deep and lived way. You have lived in both cultures. That is something truly precious. Layla hesitated. The proposal was almost unreal. I need to think about it, he finally said. Okay. Karim took a card out of his jacket pocket and wrote something on the back. My personal number, call me tomorrow. As they got up to leave, he added, One important thing, Layla. It's serious work, with a contract and everything properly formalized. There are no expectations beyond professional ones. Layla felt her face flush as she realized he had understood her apprehensions. She didn't need to say anything. He just smiled. I grew up with 5 sisters. Imagine a world where intelligent, capable women can truly flourish, especially when individuals in positions of authority are involved. The situation becomes more delicate. In the lobby, a car was already waiting for Karim. He said goodbye to Layla before leaving. Good evening, he said in Portuguese. Good evening, she replied with a smile. Good night, Layla Mendes, he pronounced her name, which sounded peculiar in his voice. I look forward to your call. As the luxury car drove away, Layla stood still for a few moments, the card with the personal number of one of the most powerful men on the planet in her hands. The night was warm, characteristic of one. In August, Rio was bustling, but a gentle breeze from the sea carried the salty scent and the promise of something new. Layla took a deep breath and put the card in her pocket. Tomorrow she would make her decision, but as she walked to the bus stop, she was overcome with the certainty that her life was about to change in an unexpected way. Layla had woken up before the alarm even went off, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the boarding pass on the nightstand. The morning light streaming through the window played the role of. Her textured hair shone subtly. Despite a restless night's sleep, her mind was still divided. The offer was irresistible. The money would solve many problems, and the experience would be enriching for her resume and research. However, there was something that made her uncomfortable about working so closely with someone like Karim Al-Fahad. Under the warm shower water, which relieved her tense muscles from the previous day, Layla made her decision. She would call him after her shift at the hotel. He needed the work hours to sort out his thoughts. To prepare for the situation, Layla arrived at the hotel and was immediately escorted to the manager's office. Mr. Garcia greeted her with an apprehensive smile, something she had never seen on him before. Good morning, Layla. Please make yourself comfortable. She sat down, feeling a sense of strangeness, as if she were in an interview, even though she had been working there for some time. Mr. Alfadar called me this morning, he began, adjusting his tie. He told me about the proposal he made to you last night. I haven't given him my answer yet, Layla said quickly. Yes, he did. He affirmed this. The manager clasped his hands on the table. I want you to know that the hotel is fully behind this opportunity. In fact, we consider it a privilege to have one of our employees chosen to work directly with such an important client. Layla raised an eyebrow. Mr. Alfarad, also mentioned his interest in acquiring our hotel chain. The manager showed a brief moment of perplexity before letting out a tense laugh. He has several investments in Brazil. I have no right to meddle in his affairs. He choked. The bottom line is that your job security will be guaranteed after the end of this temporary assignment, and the period will be considered paid leave. This exceeded Layla's expectations. It was clear that the hotel was determined to please Karim Alfad. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. You're welcome. He smiled more calmly. As for your shift today, I'll work it as usual, said Layla, getting up. I haven't formally accepted the offer yet. The manager seemed surprised but understood her hesitation. It's your choice, but know that it's not mandatory. If you choose to accept, while cleaning the rooms that morning, Layla experienced a peculiar feeling of duality. Her actions were repetitive, the result of a task she had mastered, but her mind wandered, exploring future scenarios. The prospect of working alongside Karim meant returning to the world she had left behind. The diplomatic universe, with its international negotiations and sophisticated environments. During lunch, she decided to contact the only person capable of offering advice without judgment. After 3 rings, a welcoming voice answered, "Hello, Layla, my dear." "Hi, Mom," Layla said with a smile, speaking into the phone. Although she had been living in Portugal for years, her mother's voice still carried a Rio de Janeiro accent. "I have news," Layla began, detailing the unusual situation she found herself in over the next 10 minutes. Helena Mendez listened attentively, interrupting only on rare occasions. "And what do you think?" Layla asked at the end. "I believe your father would be very proud," Helena replied after a moment's reflection. "He always said that his years living abroad would be an asset for the future. But it's not exactly the diplomatic path she'd imagined. Layla, my dear, life almost never follows the paths we dream of." Her mother's words of wisdom reassured her. Our father also taught us to recognize opportunities when they arise. When she hung up, Layla finished her shift with a new perspective. At 6 in the afternoon, she said goodbye to her uniform for the day. She changed into more comfortable clothes and, before leaving, typed Karim's number into her phone. On the second try, Karim answered. Layla Mendez didn't need to explain. He had probably already saved hers. "Mr. Alfadrad, I'm returning your call regarding your proposal, and I accept. But with a few caveats." There was a brief moment of silence, followed by a sound that almost sounded like a stifled laugh. "I'm listening. First, I need a formal contract detailing my responsibilities and the previously established amount. Second, my work hours are inflexible. Finally, my role will be that of a consultant and translator, not a personal assistant. Therefore, I will not be responsible for making coffee, organizing your schedule, or responding to requests that are not directly related to." The business negotiations continued. A longer silence ensued, leaving Layla apprehensive that she had been too direct or had wasted the opportunity. "Your conditions are perfectly acceptable," Karim finally replied in a neutral but welcoming tone. "I have a team for administrative tasks. I need your intelligence, not your domestic skills." Layla felt relief wash over her. "Thank you. The contract will be ready tomorrow morning. We can meet in the hotel lobby at 9 a.m. to sign it and start immediately. I have an important appointment at noon. I'll be there." When she hung up, Layla noticed that her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anxiety. For 2 years since she started working at the hotel, she had felt invisible, a mere uniformed figure among the group of employees who kept the glamour running behind the scenes. The next day, she would walk through the front door again, this time not as a maid, but as a skilled professional. At home, she spent hours reorganizing her small wardrobe, looking for outfits suitable for her new position. She set aside her only blazer, 2 formal dresses, and a few shirts. It wasn't an extensive wardrobe, but it would have to suffice. Before going to sleep, Layla reviewed her notes on intercultural negotiations, the central theme of her last semester of her master's degree. Interestingly, she would now put the knowledge she had acquired in theory into practice. The next day, Layla arrived at the hotel promptly at 9 a.m. She wore a navy blue blazer over a dress. For the meeting, she opted for a white blouse and black dress pants, the closest thing to a business suit she could find. Her hair was pulled back into a sophisticated low bun, and for the first time in months, a subtle touch of makeup enhanced her face. Upon arriving in the lobby, she noticed the immediate difference of being noticed, really seen by the same employees who had barely recognized her in her blue uniform. The receptionist, who had previously offered her only an inattentive nod, now smiled and greeted her enthusiastically, saying, "Good morning, Miss Mendes. Karim, already?" He waited, impeccably dressed in a light gray suit that highlighted his dark skin, accompanied by a more mature man with discreet glasses who was holding a leather briefcase. Karim introduced him. "Good morning, Layla," he said, extending his hand with a firm but cordial handshake. "This is Rashid, my legal advisor." The older man nodded politely. "The contract is finalized and ready for your review," Karim added. "How about we have some coffee? We can go over the details while enjoying breakfast." The hotel's cafe was elegant, with a view of the pool. The setting served as a backdrop as Rashid detailed the terms of the contract. Layla, attentive, examined each clause. Karim, watching her, noticed her concentration. "Is there a problem?" he asked, curious. "No," Layla replied, looking up from the document. "I'm just being careful. My father always said that a fair contract is one in which both parties feel satisfied, as if they could have gained a little more." Karim smiled, amused by her insight. Her father had proven to be a man of great wisdom. He was Layla's. A familiar pang of longing washed over him. He would have liked you, or at least found you an interesting partner to negotiate with. With all the clauses reviewed, Layla signed the contract. It was final. For 15 days, she would be Karim Al-Fahad's cultural consultant and translator. With 2 hours to go before the first meeting, Karim, glancing at his wristwatch, an object probably more valuable than Layla's apartment, suggested using the time for Layla to learn about the project. In the presidential suite, the air conditioning was now in full swing. Karim had turned the living room into a functional office. Maps of Brazil with colored dots indicating different areas covered one wall. On the main table, documents and reports were carefully organized. "The main focus is the acquisition of the Solaris Hotels chain," he said, pointing to the papers. "But I'm also evaluating investments in coffee farms in Minas Gerais and solar energy projects in the Northeast." As he spoke, Layla quickly processed the information. Karim mentally noted cultural points that could arise as obstacles in the negotiations. "Today's meeting is with Solara's expansion director, Carlos Menezes," he continued. "I have a feeling he's not sure about the purchase yet." Layla reflected on the name. "Common, but is he from São Paulo?" Karim checked his notes. "Yes, born and raised in São Paulo." Layla smiled. "People from São Paulo have a unique way of doing business, more direct compared to..." He's a typical carioca, but he still expects a certain social ritual before starting negotiations. "What kind of ritual?" "Questions about personal life, comments about the local environment, maybe a mention of soccer, if he's a fan of any team. Create a bond before getting down to business." Karinya watched him with growing curiosity. "And you, how do you advise me to approach this?" "In my culture, objectivity and clarity are considered signs of respect for other people's time. How about we find a middle ground?" Layla suggested. "Start with..." He agreed, absorbing the tip. "Start with a brief, informal conversation, perhaps mentioning something positive you've noticed about São Paulo, and then move clearly on to the professional matter. What else do I need to know?" For nearly an hour, they discussed negotiation strategies appropriate for the Brazilian setting. Layla detailed cultural nuances, common pitfalls, and how to properly interpret ambiguous responses, which are so common in the Brazilian business environment. Karim proved to be a surprisingly receptive learner. He asked intelligent questions and quickly adjusted his style. At times, they switched between Portuguese and Arabic, creating a unique working dynamic, almost as if they already had a long history of collaboration. At the end of the session, Karim announced, "We need to prepare for the meeting." He looked at Layla for a moment, then commented, "You have a talent for this, you know? Explaining cultural complexities in a clear and useful way. It must be from years of watching your father work, I think. It's more than that." Karim gathered some documents. It was a natural gift. Karim wondered if Layla should turn this skill into a profession instead of just cleaning rooms. The remark, though not meant maliciously, triggered a defensive response in Layla. "There's no shame in working honestly, Mr. Al-Fahad. I do what it takes to achieve my goals." Karim seemed momentarily surprised by Layla's firm response, then smiled. "I apologize if I sounded condescending. That was not my intention." He put the documents in his briefcase. Returning to Mr. Alpha, "I thought we had already—" Karim's advance broke the silence, and Layla couldn't help but smile. Old diplomatic habits prevailed, formality when feeling challenged. Karim, jotting something down in his briefcase, closed it and said, "Now let's show Mr. Menezes how to conduct a successful, cross-cultural negotiation." The meeting with Carlos Menezes took place in a conference room at the top of the hotel. As she entered alongside Karim, Layla noticed the curious glances of the Brazilian team members. A week ago, she could have been serving coffee in this very place. In the room, Layla was formally introduced at the main table. Carina introduced her. "This is Layla Mendes, my cultural consultant and translator." Menezes, a man in his 50s with gray hair at the sides, greeted Layla with a courteous smile, but his eyes conveyed a certain perplexity. He was probably wondering why a man like Alpha had chosen someone so young for such an important position. Based on Layla's advice, Karim opened the conversation by mentioning São Paulo, highlighting the impressive architecture of Avenida Paulista, which he had visited during his last stay in Brazil. Menezes immediately felt proud when talking about his city. "It's the financial center of the country, something totally different from Rio. With all due respect," he added, glancing at Layla. "Each place has its own charm," she replied, diplomatically. "But I agree that São Paulo has a unique vibe." The tense atmosphere eased considerably when Karim skillfully changed the subject. For the companies, the mood was already much more relaxed. "I believe that Solares Hotels has a lot to gain from this partnership," Karim began. "Our plan values not only material assets, but also the knowledge and reputation you have developed." Menezes agreed, but his expression changed subtly. "Without a doubt, Mr. Alfad. However, there are still some points that concern us." Layla noticed the reluctance in the executive's words. Under the table, she lightly touched Karim's arm, a prearranged gesture. He understood immediately. "I understand your concerns perfectly, Mr. Menezes." Karim. He relaxed his posture, adopting a more relaxed tone. "When we invest in a country, we don't just acquire property, we become an integral part of the community." Layla noticed how Karim was masterfully using the tips she had given him about the importance of valuing emotional aspects in Brazilian negotiations, going beyond numbers and clauses. The meeting then continued for 2 hours at a productive pace. Whenever Menezes used a technical term from the Brazilian hotel market, Layla delicately explained it to Karim. As the negotiations seemed to lose momentum, she gently introduced suggestions for culturally sensitive approaches. At a critical point during the discussion about the team's permanence after the acquisition, Menezes showed obvious tension. "Our employees are like family," he said, his voice heavy with affection. Layla then understood that they had reached the core of the resistance. She crossed herself slightly and whispered in Arabic to Karim, "Hada kalb al-mila, aluzraidfa al-Brasilia." That is the essence of the problem. Family has immense significance in Brazilian culture. Carina nodded subtly and adjusted her strategy. "Mr. Menezes, we share that perspective. In Arab culture, loyalty and family are essential pillars." He paused for a considerable time. He then proposed a clause ensuring that all employees would remain with the company for at least 5 years, with impartial performance reviews and prospects for advancement within the group. Menezes' face lit up. It was exactly what he wanted to hear. After the meeting, the Brazilians showed considerable receptivity to the acquisition proposal. Menezes even invited Karim to dinner at his home the next time he visited São Paulo, a clear sign of progress. In a moment of privacy, Karim leaned back in his chair, visibly pleased. This interaction was remarkably more effective than my previous experiences. "You adapted very well," said Layla, as she organized her notes, especially noting his concern for the employees. Due to his ability to translate, culturally, not just linguistically, Karim glanced at his watch. "We have another meeting in 2 hours with the coffee plantation investors. Time for lunch." At the hotel restaurant, at a reserved table overlooking the blue sea of Copacabana, Layla noticed the lightness that emanated from Karim, different from the previous day. "You seem more relaxed today," she commented. "I'm a professional, Layla," he replied, taking a sip of water. "Efficiency satisfies me. Today, thanks to your help, my productivity was exceptional." The waiter presented the menu. With a gesture, Carino dispensed with the need to order. Could he order for us? Lila opted for fish moqueca, describing it as a dish that encapsulated Brazilian cultural fusion with indigenous and African influences, as well as the very essence of the country. Karim added, demonstrating a deeper knowledge of Brazil than she had imagined. While waiting for lunch, he surprised her with an intimate question. "Why did you choose to study international relations? Was it your father's influence?" "Partly." Layla hesitated, rarely broaching the subject, but the truth was that after living in several countries, she had never felt completely integrated into any one place. She wanted to better understand the connections between cultures, the forces that bring nations together or drive them apart, the feeling of not belonging entirely to any one place. Carina showed understanding. "I understand that feeling well," he said. Layla looked at him, surprised. "Did you think you were firmly anchored in your culture?" "I spent almost a decade studying in the United States and England." Karim absent-mindedly drew the shape of a water glass. "When I returned to the Emirates, I no longer felt completely integrated. It was too much for some traditionalists, too Arab for my Western colleagues. This unexpected revelation added a new layer to our professional relationship. We were no longer simply the Brazilian Maid and the Arab billionaire. We were two people who recognized the complexity of moving between different cultures." Lunch arrived, and Karim tried the moqueca with genuine enthusiasm. "Incredible," he exclaimed after the first bite. "The coconut milk softens it. The seasoning without losing the flavor. It's just like successful cross-cultural negotiations," said Layla, "smoothing out differences without ever losing the identity of each side." Karim smiled, delighted by the comparison. "You're very smart, Layla Mendes," he said. The compliment took her by surprise. For a moment, their eyes met across the table, and Layla felt an inexplicable sensation arise in her chest. It wasn't simply attraction, or at least it wasn't limited to that, but rather a deep connection, as if both felt a mutual understanding of having found someone who understood them. An essential part of her experiences, Layla composed herself and resumed her professional demeanor. The conversation about the meeting with the coffee producers took a different turn. The miners, known for their reserve and indirect style of communication, require a specific approach. You have to be prepared for various narratives and seemingly unrelated conversations before getting to the heart of the matter. Karim took the change of subject in stride, and the rest of the lunch was spent discussing strategies for the next meeting. In the weeks that followed, a routine was established. Throughout the day, Lila assisted Karim in meetings, translating documents and offering advice on cultural subtleties. 3 times a week, she devoted herself to her master's classes, leaving early for them. Karim always respected these commitments, adjusting his schedule to accommodate hers. With each successfully completed meeting, Karim's self-esteem regarding his abilities increased noticeably. He began to seek her opinion not only on cultural issues, but also on the business itself, risk assessments, potential investments, and strategies for. At the end of a particularly tiring afternoon, after finalizing the paperwork for the purchase of a coffee farm in Minas Gerais, Karim noticed the exhaustion on her face. "You look tired," he remarked. "I'm fine," she replied automatically, correcting her posture. "Just a long day and a grueling week." Karim closed his laptop. "Cancel our appointments for tomorrow," he said. Layla looked at him confused. But we have the meeting with the solar project investors, which can be rescheduled. His voice left no room for argument. You need to rest, and I need to better understand this country where I'm investing millions. What do you suggest? A day away from the business environment? He smiled, a sincere smile that was uncommon during negotiations. You're my cultural guide, aren't you? Take me to the river that travelers don't know about. The suggestion was irresistible, but also intimidating. A whole day with him, without the barriers of formal meetings and papers to analyze. Wouldn't that be inappropriate? He asked hesitantly. Why not? Karim seemed genuinely perplexed. It's part of his job would help me understand Brazil better, and since we would be in public places, there was nothing wrong with that. He was right, it was true. His contract provided for cultural consulting, not just negotiations, but Layla was still unsure. You don't have to give me an answer now, Karim said, noticing her hesitation. Think about it, and let me know tomorrow. That day, in her apartment, Layla weighed the pros and cons. From a professional standpoint, it made sense to introduce Karim to elements of Brazilian culture that could be advantageous to his business on a personal level. The problem was this. In recent days, the connection between them had become increasingly difficult to deny. It wasn't just physical attraction, although that was an obvious part of it. There was something deeper, a harmony between their minds. They communicated complex ideas with few words, sometimes with just a glance, and moved naturally between Arabic, Portuguese, and English, weaving a linguistic space of their own, shared only by them. Her cell phone vibrated, displaying a message. It was Karim. Regarding the decision, I will express my disappointment if the answer is negative, but I will respect your choice, regardless of the decision. His direct and sincere message was characteristic of him. No beating around the bush, no games, just the truth, giving her complete freedom to decide. Layla typed her reply. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the hotel lobby, casual clothes and comfortable shoes. The confirmation came right away. I'll be there. Good evening, Layla Mendes. That night, as she struggled to sleep, Layla couldn't get the next day out of her head. A line of expectation. The line between professional and personal was thin, and the next day they would be walking into dangerous territory. It's just work, she repeated to herself. But as she slept, part of her recognized that the situation had transcended that simple definition. When she arrived at the hotel lobby the next morning, it took Layla a few seconds to identify Karim. Without his usual business suit and rigid posture, he looked like a completely new person. He was wearing dark jeans, a short-sleeved blue shirt, and sneakers. His hair, usually, carefully combed but with a few strands falling over his forehead, he looked more relaxed. I'm going for a casual look, he said when he saw her arrive, a subtle smile on his lips. Layla had also opted for comfort. Jeans, a white t-shirt, and sneakers. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore just a touch of lipstick, which was perfect for our destination, she thought, surprised at how young and close he seemed in that outfit. Where are we going, anyway? Karim asked. As they left the hotel, Layla took him to see the real Rio. A radiant smile lit up her face, with a sparkle of adventure in her eyes. Trust me, she said. Instead of getting into one of the luxury cars that usually waited for Karim, Layla led him to a bus stop. He frowned but didn't resist. Part of the authentic experience? He asked, amused. Exactly, she replied, checking the schedule on her phone app. You only know the corporate side of Brazil, Karim. Today you'll discover the reality of how most Brazilians live. The bus, crowded as always, arrived. Layla showed Karim how to use the transit card, and to his surprise he watched each step closely, showing genuine interest. Where are we going first? He asked, holding on to one of the bars, as the bus wound its way through the busy streets. Breakfast at Colombo's Bakery. A spark of recognition flashed in Karim's eyes. I've read about that place, he said. One of the most traditional cafes in Rio, isn't it? Layla agreed. Layla sensed the seriousness behind the lightness in his voice. Did you do your homework? He asked. I always do before investing anywhere. Layla agreed, but she knew that reading about a country and actually experiencing it were two very different things. The Colombo confectionery, with its elegant details such as Belgian mirrors, stained glass windows, and a typical Belle Époque atmosphere, welcomed them with tranquility. That morning, they found a table in the main hall, where the high ceiling and Art Nouveau ornaments transported them on a tour of Rio de Janeiro in the early 20th century. Remarkable, Karim remarked, surveying his surroundings. It looks like one of Vienna's historic cafes. It was inspired by them, Layla said. At the time, in late 19th and early 20th century Brazil, everything that came from Europe was fascinating. Rio underwent a major urban renovation to resemble Paris. As a waitress approached, Layla ordered coffee, cheese bread, and cream pastries for both of them in Portuguese. After the waitress left, Karim asked, "What is cheese bread?" "A true delicacy from Minas Gerais, prepared with manioc starch and cheese. It's almost a symbol of our country." At breakfast, Karim savored the warm cheese bread and closed his eyes, enjoying the flavor. "If all your recommendations today are as delicious as this," he said, "I'll have to extend my visit to Brazil." Layla smiled, pleased. There was something peculiarly intimate about sharing her culture with him in this way, outside the corporate environment and contracts. After breakfast, they explored the historic center of Rio. Layla explained to Karim the difference between the Portuguese colonial buildings and the imperial palaces and modern buildings that now make up the urban skyline. "It's like an open-air museum," he commented as he stopped in front of the Imperial Passage, the former seat of the colonial and imperial government. Brazil, in fact, is a mosaic of historical eras. Layla made a sweeping gesture. Here you can glimpse the colonial past, there the imperial period, and further on, the Republic and the era of modernization. Everything is intertwined, not always peacefully, as is common in countries with complex historical backgrounds. Karim, he seemed to be deep in thought. The Emirates also have this duality. Futuristic skyscrapers coexist with traditional markets that have been around for centuries. Riding the Santa Teresa tram, one of the last tram lines still operating in the city. As they traveled along the steep slopes of the Bohemian neighborhood, Layla noticed Karim recording every detail. The houses painted in vibrant colors, the artistic graffiti, the galleries and studios that dotted the route. Santa Teresa and Layla visited a modest cafe run by an elderly lady who greeted them warmly. "Dona Zélia, allow me to introduce my friend Karim. He is visiting Rio today." "Welcome, Karim," exclaimed the lady, demonstrating warm Brazilian hospitality. "Is this your first time in the hills?" "It's my first time in the real Brazil," replied Karim in Portuguese, leaving Dona Zélia and Layla quite surprised. They sat down at a table on the porch with a breathtaking view of Guanabara Bay. Dona Zélia, insisting on serving her famous orange cake with passion fruit syrup, asked, "Have you been improving your Portuguese?" Layla was impressed, she said. "I have one," she said. "It's an excellent reason to learn," he said, his eyes meeting hers for a moment before turning back to the landscape. "This place is truly magical. Tell me how you discovered it. My mother used to bring me here when I was little, until we moved out of the country." Layla felt a tightness in her chest, a memory from the past. It was a Sunday ritual. "Do you remember life before all the changes?" The question touched her with unexpected sensitivity. Layla reflected for a moment. Sometimes security lies in staying in one place, in growing deep roots. But there is also the temptation to... The freedom to move around, to absorb different cultures, that is the dilemma of global citizens. Karen felt she belonged everywhere, but at the same time, nowhere. The conversation flowed naturally as they enjoyed the cake and contemplated the view of the city. They shared their adventures in distant lands, revealing unexpected coincidences. They had both visited the same little-known museum in London, enjoyed the same typical Libyan dish, and shared a dislike for crowded airports. Later, they walked down the hillside, winding their way through narrow alleys. They strolled along narrow streets and vibrant stairways. At a small viewpoint, they stopped to enjoy the sunset, which was beginning to paint the sky orange. "What do you miss most about Oman?" Karim asked as they enjoyed the scenery. Layla pondered for a moment. The perfume, the mixture of spices in the air, the incense in the mosques, the smell of the sea intertwined with the scent of the desert. A smile lit up her face as she remembered that time, the people, the sincere hospitality, the respect for elders, the way strangers invited you in for coffee. Karim said, using the term. Arabic for traditional coffee, yes, with cardamom and dates. Layla felt a pang of nostalgia. Karim, meanwhile, gazed at the horizon, the silence of the desert at sunrise. In that emptiness, he found a peace that existed nowhere else. His voice softened. And the prayers? I'm not very devout. But there's something welcoming about the muezzin's call 5 times a day. A reminder for everyone to stop, breathe, reconnect. This glimpse of his fragility surprised Layla. During the 2 weeks they had worked together, he had always remained composed and professional. This side of him was rare, known to few. The sky, now tinged with intense orange and pink, stretched out before them. A comfortable silence settled as they both enjoyed the scenery. You've had a rich life, Layla Mendez said to Karim finally, her eyes still fixed on the view. Born to a diplomat, her life had taken her to many countries, mastering multiple languages and understanding cultural nuances that even experienced diplomats might not notice. Now I clean hotel rooms, she finished, with a touch of sarcasm, but without resentment. Karim looked at her for the first time. People like you don't go unnoticed for long. A tone in his voice made Layla feel a warmth spreading across her neck. She looked away, suddenly aware of the short distance between them. We should get going, she said, regaining her composure. We still have one more place to visit before dinner. They walked down the rest of the hill and caught another bus. Karim seemed to be getting more and more. He enjoyed the public transportation, observing the interactions of the locals with curiosity. Where are we going? He asked as they got off near Lapa, Rio's bohemian neighborhood and cultural heart. Layla smiled, leading him through narrow alleys to a small street bar where the sounds of guitar and cavaquinho drifted out. It was a simple place, with wooden tables on the street and waiters rushing around carrying trays of beer. On a small makeshift stage, a group of musicians played samba. The atmosphere was traditional. Some customers were already dancing in the tight space between the tables, forming a samba circle. It's the most authentic expression of the carioca soul, said Layla as they looked for a table. With 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand, they watched the musicians and let themselves be carried away by the contagious energy of the place, where people of all ages sang in unison, songs that seemed to vibrate in the heart of the city. It's fascinating how music can bring people together, reflected Karim, as he watched an elderly man dancing with a young woman who could have been his granddaughter, the rhythm of the samba binding them together. Born in marginalized communities, samba has become a national symbol, representing Brazil's history through art. Layla moved gently to the music, a fusion of African, European, and indigenous influences that resulted in something unique. A musician, noticing the couple, approached them playing a cavaquinho and, with a smile for Layla, invited her. Let's dance, young lady. Show your boyfriend how to dance samba. Before she could clarify the situation, Layla felt her face flush. To everyone's surprise, Karim seemed to be enjoying himself. Come on, Layla, show me how to dance samba, he challenged, a mischievous smile lighting up his lips. I don't know how to dance very well, she protested. No one knows until they try, replied the musician, intensifying the rhythm of the cavaquinho. To her amazement, Karim stood up and held out his hand. If you lead me in this dance, as you have done in our business, I'm sure we'll be a success. The challenging look in his eyes was irresistible. Layla took the hand he offered her and let herself be led to a small space where other couples. Follow my rhythm, she asked, feeling unexpectedly nervous. It's all about the rhythm. Karim, a quick learner, after a few uncertain steps, began to master the basic movements. Their bodies moved naturally to the rhythm of the music, hands intertwined, eyes fixed on each other. There was something almost magical about the way they moved together, finding a harmony that transcended cultural and social barriers. For a few moments, he wasn't the Arab billionaire, and she wasn't the former maid. 2 Brazilians shared a moment of pure happiness. At the end of the song, they remained silent for a brief moment, breathing heavily. A mutual warmth still present between their intertwined hands. Something had changed between them. An invisible line had been crossed. Karim was the first to break the mood, gently letting go of her hand. "Thank you for the lesson," he said, his voice deeper than usual. They returned to the table in silence. Lila sensed a tense atmosphere, a clear awareness of every movement Karim made beside her was a lesson. "This day has been eye-opening," he said after a moment. "In what way?" "You've shown me a Brazil that no business expert could ever show me. Understanding the spirit of this country, what drives its people, is now clearer to me." He paused, his gaze connecting with hers. "And you too, I understand better now." The dinner that followed the night of Samba was unique compared to the others. They opted for a modest restaurant on the Ipanema seafront, away from the sophisticated places Karim usually frequented. The sea breeze carried the smell of grilled fish and lemon, and the murmur of the waves provided the ideal soundtrack for the evening. "It was the best day I've had in a long time," Karim confessed, his eyes sparkling with the lights illuminating the shore. "Even with public transportation and without the comfort of air conditioning," Layla joked with a smile. "That's why he took a sip of water. You know what the problem with being rich is, Layla? People think you're just looking for extravagant experiences. No one thinks to show you the real side of things." The sincerity in his voice moved Layla deeply. Throughout the day, she had seen him in a new light, no longer as the eccentric Arab billionaire, but as a curious, flexible, and surprisingly humble individual. "Tomorrow we'll resume our meeting schedule," she said, feeling a slight regret. "Yes, but something has changed between us, don't you think?" Karim looked at her intently. She understood perfectly what he meant. We couldn't ignore what had happened that day. The dancing, the intimate conversations, the moments of an authentic connection had undeniably transformed their relationship. Karim gently interrupted. "Don't say anything now. Just think about it. When my business here is finished next week, I will return to the Emirates, and then what?" The question hung in the air, full of possibilities and difficulties. Layla couldn't find an answer. Her contract was about to expire. She would return to her routine as a student and maid, while Karim would rejoin his world of private jets and skyscrapers. The silence was then broken. The waiter brought dessert, a milk pudding that they shared quietly, enjoying the last moments of that exceptional day. When Karim dropped her off at her apartment in Botafogo, a moment of silence ensued. They stayed in the car, the driver waiting patiently outside. "Thank you for today," Layla finally broke the silence. "Thank you," replied Karim, smiling with his dark, intense eyes, which even in the dim light of the car seemed to convey his gratitude for her showing him her world. There was so much that had not been expressed between them, so many words to be said. Lila just nodded and got out of the car, taking with her the doubt that hung in the air. What did the future hold? The following days were marked by renewed energy at work. The acquisition of the solar networks was completed, agreements with coffee producers in Minas Gerais were finalized, and negotiations for solar energy projects in the Northeast moved forward. At each meeting, they worked like a well-oiled machine, with Karim masterfully conducting the negotiations. Layla smoothed over cultural and linguistic differences. However, there was something. Things were different now. A glance that lingered a few seconds longer, a hand that sometimes touched the other. During the exchange of papers, work conversations that always ended up straying to personal matters when they were alone. The night before Karim's departure, the last meeting had a positive outcome. All contracts were signed, all terms agreed upon. Lila's work was finally done. After the last executive left the conference room, Karim closed the door and walked over to her. "We've come to the end," he said, with a finality in his voice that made Layla's heart ache. "Congratulations on the successful deal," he added, maintaining a professional tone as he organized his documents. "Brazil will certainly benefit from your investments." Lila Karim approached him, her presence becoming a striking presence between them. "Look at me," she asked, trying to control her expression. "Have you thought about my question?" he asked. "About what will happen from now on." "I've thought about it a lot." Layla took a deep breath, "but I can't see how." "It could work. Our lives, however, are very different, Karim. You will return to your empire in the Emirates, while I devote myself to finishing my master's degree and working at the hotel. But what if there were another alternative?" Karim took a leather briefcase from the table and handed it to Layla. Intrigued, she opened it and found an official document bearing the Alpha Holdings logo. "What is this?" she asked. "I'm setting up a permanent office in Rio to manage my Brazilian investments." His eyes sparkled intensely. "I need someone to lead it, someone who is fluent in both cultures, who speaks the languages, capable of navigating these two realities with ease." Layla blinked, surprised. "Are you offering me a position?" "I'm offering you a collaboration," Karim said, moving closer. "Professional and, if you wish, personal." Layla's heart raced. She reread the document, absorbing the details of the position. Director of Operations for Brazil, with a salary that left her speechless. "Karim, I haven't finished my master's degree yet. The office won't be up and running for another 4 months. More than enough time to finish her studies." He smiled because, in fact, her research on trade relations between Brazil and the Gulf countries would be extremely useful for the project. She closed the folder, her mind flooded with ideas. She needed to think. It was a lot of information to take in. "I understand." She nodded in agreement. "My flight leaves tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll be at the hotel until then." That night, Layla could hardly sleep. Karim's offer represented everything she had ever dreamed of professionally. A job that recognized her value, unique skills, the chance to put her academic knowledge into practice, and financial independence. But personally, that was the complicated part. At some point in the last few weeks, the arrogant Arab businessman who had been so rude in the hotel lobby had turned into someone she cared deeply about. Someone who actually saw her not as an employee or translator, but as Layla Mendez, in all her richness and potential. The next day, she woke up with a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She knew exactly what she had to do. When she arrived at the hotel, she headed straight for the presidential suite. Karim opened the door, already dressed for travel in an impeccable dark suit. A smile lit up Layla's face. He hadn't expected to see her so soon. "I have my answer," she said, entering the suite and feeling a new confidence settle within her about what was to come. Karim watched her closely. "I accept the job," she began. "As for the personal aspect, however, we should be cautious, get to know each other outside of work, and see if what we feel is real." He had survived the real world. A subtle smile appeared on his lips. A clever and truthful answer. It was exactly what she wanted. "And then you agreed, wholeheartedly." Karim approached her and took her hands, but that meant visits to the Emirates as his official consultant, without a doubt. Layla smiled. "Without a doubt. A strictly professional commitment?" "Yes, absolutely." Her eyes, however, revealed the seriousness of her statement, and she would need to return to Brazil frequently to supervise the investments. Of course, they looked at each other and smiled, the tension finally dissipating between them. "Can I take you to the airport?" she asked. He agreed without hesitation. 18 months later, the sun was setting over Dubai, painting the sky with a spectacle of orange and pink that was reflected in the countless glass towers. On the terrace of one of the most imposing buildings, Layla gazed at the city she now considered her second home. The last few months had been intense, a real roller coaster ride. After completing her master's degree with honors, she took over the leadership of Alpha Hard Holdings' Brazilian office. Under her direction, the group's investments in Brazil had grown considerably, now encompassing conservation projects in the Amazon and educational programs in vulnerable communities. On a personal note, a smile appeared on her lips as she felt 2 strong arms wrap around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" asked Karim, resting his chin on her shoulder. "About how life can change in an instant," she replied, turning to face him. "About how an angry man and an Arabic-speaking maid brought us to this point." Karim smiled, his eyes brimming with the same warmth she had felt during their exploration of the river that day. And speaking of changes, he touched her left hand, where an engagement ring, a symbol of their recent commitment, sparkled. With the decision of where to celebrate their union, Rio or Dubai, still up in the air, Layla suggested, "How about both? A traditional Arab ceremony here, and a Brazilian party in Rio. A celebration that reflected who they were, people from 2 worlds," she concluded. Perfect, Karim agreed, pulling her closer as if to seal the union. In Dubai, under a sky tinged with the vibrant colors of the sunset, they embraced as the call to evening prayer echoed softly around them. Layla reflected on all the coincidences, choices, and moments of courage that had led them to this point. From a discreet maid to an admired director and future wife, her journey had been unique. The most incredible thing, however, was that she had never had to choose between her two worlds, Brazilian and Arab, intellectual and practical, past and future. Finding someone who understood her duality, someone who shared it, was the most extraordinary thing of all. "Raibuk," he whispered in her ear. "I love you." "She loves me too," she replied. Regardless of language, what they felt transcended words. What began with a broken glass and an unusual intervention evolved into an equal partnership, a bridge between cultures, and a love that flourished precisely because of, and not despite, their differences. Looking back at the horizon, Layla saw not only the future they had built together, but also a range of possible futures, opening up before them, bright, full of hope, and gloriously shared.